are times it just feels so good to be right. Even when it means a breach, a distance from others. Times that it's almost irresistible to roll the clean, metallic taste of righteousness on the tongue. Times when you get the jello-y surge of justified anger swimming above the eyes. Times when it's hard to resist a little bit of hyperbole, to score a few extra martyr points when you recount the story. There are times when that anger, that breach, that distance, that rightness feels like the only thing that you've got left. Covering deep violations of trust, or just plain raw hurt. There are times when we may even say, Holy Love, I've got this. My law and I, we've got it. Don't ask anything of love from me. Just leave me alone. Yet Holy Love stands vigil, awaiting our turn toward home. Every single day of our lives, the Sacred Heart is giddy with love for us all over again, regardless of our state of being. Ancient poet and mystic Hafez makes it quite plain in a tiny little poem. Complaint is only possible while living in the suburbs of God. How often have we stubbornly settled for takeout from the strip mall when we are invited to the downtown Taj Mahal of Love's Banquet? How often have we dwelt in the cozy cul-de-sacs of activism not to co-opt our fire by living with the enemy? How often have we banished ourselves to a dull, quiet enclave so we don't stand the risk of rubbing elbows with those who've ripped us off? Complaint is only possible while living in the suburbs of God. When they entered the Nazi death camp of Ravensbrück, somebody found a poem, a prayer, written sitting next to a dead child. It goes like this. O Lord, remember not only the women and the men of goodwill, but also those of ill will. But don't remember all of the suffering they inflicted on us. Remember the fruits we have bought thanks to this suffering. Our comradeship, our loyalty, our humility, our courage, our generosity, our greatness of heart, which has grown out of this. And when they come to judgment, let all the fruits we have borne be their forgiveness. It never once says, I forgive, we forgive, we're ready to forgive. It pleads with the merciful one, let all the fruits we have borne in this be their forgiveness. There's this story, this disturbing story that I trust you've heard a couple of times before, even already this morning. The Pharisees and the scribes, the good church folk, the preachers and the deacons are grumbling that Jesus is fraternizing with sinners and tax collectors, fraternizing with gun runners and Ponzi scheme architects. Jesus actually tells 3 stories. The first story is of a shepherd who has 100 sheep, loses one, leaves the 99, goes and searches everywhere till he finds that one and lays that sheep on his shoulders and brings it back home and throws a party in celebration. The second story is about a woman who has 10 silver coins and loses 1 coin, sets the 9 down, lights a lantern, sweeps the whole house, crawls on her hands and knees through every crook and cranny till she finds that coin, and then invites all of the neighbors to celebrate what was lost is now found. This third story is also about lost and found, but this one deals with human beings. A man had 2 sons. Together they owned and operated a family restaurant, handed on down through the generations. It wasn't a white linen place, but it was pretty close. It was reputable. It always served quality food, a steady crowd of faithful diners, an institution in town, really. One Sunday morning during the peak of the brunch service, the youngest son came into the father's office and closed the door and said, "Listen, I can't do this anymore. I'm suffocating. I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but I need out. I need a buyout. I need a different life." The father gazed through the portal window out into the frenzied kitchen. And just then, a whole stack of plates slid off the counter and crashed to the floor. And in the eerily, almost complete silence after the crash, the father sighed and barely audible said to the son, "Give me till Wednesday. Let me see what I can do." They both knew that this proposition was to wrest every penny of equity and then some from the business. They both knew this father was a good employer. And this was going to mean at least layoffs, if not much more. Wednesday morning came. The younger son was sitting at the bar looking at the sports page when the father walked in with a check in his hand. And he handed it to the son. The son quickly looked at the figure on the piece of paper and without fanfare said thanks. Grabbed his father's hand and then left. The older son circled, brooding, silent. And all the tongues of the employees and the rest of the restaurant community were wagging. The younger son was off, skipping on to a finer life. Charlotte, Atlanta, South Miami. He tried his hand at a few businesses there. But then when the economic situation turned and the tourist trade nearly dried up, he found himself indebted, broke, and homeless. One day, he was at the deep fryer at McDonald's. He realized he would never have eaten this stuff at his dad's restaurant. began to wonder, would I have a place at the elbow at the dish boy back home? Somehow, somebody gave him a Metro bus ticket back to Greensboro. And the whole way back, he was rehearsing what he was going to say to his dad. I'm no longer your son. No. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. I think that'll work. Would I be allowed to work in the dish room? The bus arrived in Greensboro at 4 a.m. on Saturday. He called his dad. Could I have a ride? His father showed up in the depot. He ran through the hall and embraced the son in a bear hug and kissed him all over the neck, weeping, embarrassingly so. The son started in on the well-rehearsed speech. I know I've been more than a jerk to you. I know I've been more than a jerk to everybody in the restaurant. And his dad threw in the keys to the almost new car that had been waiting for him the whole time he was gone. Offered him fresh clothes, gave him an iPad. And said, hold whatever you have to say. We'll talk later. This afternoon, we need to have a party. In fact, in about an hour, that big shipment of veal medallions is going to arrive at the loading dock. That afternoon, while the live music played and the buffet was reserviced, the father asked the barkeep, "Where is my older son?" He said, "I think he's on down the street at the billiards lounge." The father left and made his way down the street and walked into the billiards lounge. And when the older son saw him coming in the door, he turned his back. And all of the pool games that were going on came to a stop as everybody waited to see what was going to happen now. As the father approached the older son could not hold back anymore. He said, "Listen, I've been here the whole time. I've done all of the stock orders. I've filled in when the cleanup crew has abandoned us. I've bailed you out when we were in trouble. And you haven't so much as offered a pasta dinner with me and my friends once our shift was over. And now, that kid, that reprobate, has come back with his tail between his legs after he's played you like a fiddle, and you're acting as if he is our Savior. This is a plain slap in my face." The father gazed out through the hazy picture window of the billiards lounge into the bright light of the street, his face flushed with embarrassment. And barely in a whisper, he said, "You're my son. Everything I have is yours. My whole life is for you. But I can't give up on love. Everybody is watching how I'm going to treat this return home, and they, if I'm lucky, will follow my suit and welcome him back. What what seems really not good turns out for good. This too will be more for you, even though you can't see it right now. I hope you will come home. And then he set himself down in a stool in the corner of the billiards lounge and waited. The party raged on down the street at the restaurant. People kept asking for him at this party. And as things moved along into the evening, the younger son turned 2 sheets to the wind next to the beer keg. And the father kept on waiting, palms open, heart open. A filibuster of love. Holy love stands vigil, awaiting each of our returns home. Whether we've squandered the fortunes of grace or are too hurt and too angry to join the party of grace, every single day of our lives, the Sacred Heart is giddy with love for us, regardless of what state we are in. You know something? Complaint is only possible while living in the suburbs